it gives me great pleasure to introduce Safinah Danish Elahi, the author of Eye on the Prize. Earlier, she has published a collection of poetry titled The Unbridled Romance of Love and Pain. Yes, she is a lawyer, an educationist, and is there anything else that you'd like to tell us about?
Mother of two.
You're also a mother, indeed. So it gives me great pleasure to introduce this book, The Eye on the Prize, and welcome everyone to the launch.
Thank you, Taha.
Indeed.
Fellow author.
Fellow author. And that's something you don't get to hear a lot.
Yes.
So let me begin with something fairly basic, a question that writers often get asked, and they're actually tired of answering. What inspired this book?
Well, Taha, I think that us writers know we're also great readers. So I've read a lot of Pakistani authors, and I just felt before writing this book that I wanted to write about something that hasn't been written about before. So I feel like the topic that I chose, which was helicopter parenting or children in a setting or a school setting, I wanted to humanize that and sort of paint a picture of society which we usually don't read about Pakistan or Karachi particularly. A lot of, I think, literature has been written in Karachi, but most of it is written about terrorism or, crime.
Is it primarily from an outsider's perspective?
It is, and at the same time, I also, people who have read the book may understand that I've also tried to humanize, Karachi's elite.
Karachi's elite.
Yeah,
Right.
so I've tried to come up with characters, try to get in their minds about how they bring up their children, and I've tried to make it a fun story, an interesting story about a couple of people who are living in Karachi and a city that's plagued by crime and previously terrorism as well. But there's a set in society that's sort of unaffected by it as well, I'd say.
Completely insulated from it. And these are your characters in
Yes,
this
and
book.
I mean, there's this line of life going on in my story, which has nothing to do with, for example, bombing or the north or the army, for example. So
Without giving any spoilers, I think there are only a
yeah,
few
yeah.
mentions of anything political.
Yes,
There's one
yes.
mention of the Quetta bombings.
Yes, so
And
I
just a slogan.
that
one
was
of our story.
also
That's it.
yes, that was also deliberate. I did it because it's not like I'm just taking the bubble out and not acknowledging the fact that there is nothing. But I do feel like the characters in the story are not so affected in a daily manner by what goes on in the news, especially. I don't know if the book is going to make it out of Pakistan, but if it does,
Let's hope it
I
does,
hope
yeah.
yes, I do hope so. But I do hope that people out of Pakistan also read that it's like any other country, and not every day do you get mugged, and not every day is about crime. But people are leading this kind of life as well.
So would you like to read for us?
Yeah, yes, sure.
And could you tell everyone where you're reading from, not the
Yeah.
page, but just a
So
brief introduction
this
as to
is
what you are?
yeah. So I'm just going to choose a couple of pages from the second chapter, and hoping not to give away too much of the story.
Don't.
But I found this scene particularly interesting because when I was writing it, I wanted to. I mean, none of this is really funny. It's not humorous, but it's entertaining. Which is I like to call my writing entertaining.
The book is extremely entertaining. So
Thank you.
There is no doubt about that.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, just a bit of background, I guess, about Shazre. Shazre is the CEO of a textile design company, and she has two daughters. Her older one's called Amara Noor, and younger one is Natalia Sophia. So, as we were just talking, that this is, they micromanage their children and picking them up from one class to another, not maybe emotionally as available as I don't know parenting a while ago was. Okay, Shajri speed dialed driver 2 to inquire about Natalia Sofia. Her ballet class would be ending soon. Driver 2 and the new nanny was supposed to take her to Mandarin class soon after. Another nanny and driver 1 had taken Amara Noor to a creative writing class. She'd insisted Shajri enroll her in. Although Amara Noor was in the fifth grade now, Shazre wasn't comfortable sending her around town alone with a driver. One just couldn't be too careful these days. But coordinating between multiple drivers and nannies had become a more demanding task than being CEO of her own company. Shazre recalled a conversation with Amara Noor about her upcoming test week. When she'd attempted to ask her daughter about how her preparation was going, Amara Noor grew irritable and defensive, as if Shazre had insulted her. Shazre shook her head, trying to brush aside any negative thoughts, and made a mental note to have a detailed conversation with Amara Noor later. For now, she had a lot of work to do. She promised herself she'd carve out some time from her busy schedule to spend with the girls. She already needed to talk to Natalia Sofia about this year's track day, her youngest daughter's first competitive sports event at the prestigious KIS, that's Karachi International School. Fictitious. So, 2 years ago, Amara Noor had solemnly declared herself an athletic agnostic and dashed her mother's hope. Now that Natalia Sofia had reached the third grade, Shazre could barely conceal her excitement, and her innately athletic young daughter would clinch the golden ticket to the prestigious 2020 Asian Games, promised to the winners at the end at this year's track day. Shazri could live with the fact that her marriage was losing its sheen, but she was not going to allow this prize to slip from her hands. Of course, her ambition and competitive streak had more to do with her desire to see Natalia Sofia excel. Despite making 3 attempts to call driver 2, Abdul Khan, Shazre got no response. Then she tried calling Natalia Sofia's nanny and panicked when she realized that her phone was powered off. I'll have to reschedule this meeting, she thought. Damn it. She made a swift U turn and broke a red light as she switched on Google Maps and typed the address of Natalia Sofia's ballet class. 22 minutes to her destination, the app promptly informed her. Crossing her fingers, she called the nanny once more. A few minutes later, Shazre parked her Mercedes outside the posh bungalow where Natalia Sofia went for her ballet class. If this were a more law abiding city, she would have been issued a ticket for speeding. She raced to the front door and rang the bell. A teenage girl clad in tattered shalwar kameez answered the door. How it irked her when people hired children for housework. She would have to speak to the ballet teacher about this. Are the kids here? Shazre inquired in Urdu. What's your child's name, ma'am? The girl replied. Natalia Sofia. Natalia? Ya Sofia? The bewildered girl asked, cocking her head against her shoulder. Her name is Natalia Sofia, Shazre said angrily. I don't have time for foolish questions. Tell me, is my daughter inside? Ji Baji, the girl nodded, pointing to the large hall on her left. Shazre went inside the hall to find Natalia Sofia sitting alone. Mummy, you're so late. Sweetheart, I sent Martha to pick you up, Shazre said as she tried to call Abdul Khan again. I don't know what happened. As they walked towards her car, Shazri heard a familiar ringtone. Following the melody, she made her way to where she spotted the Toyota Corolla the driver too had been allotted to Natalia Sofia's transportation and cut the call. Shazri strode towards the car, expecting to see Abdul Khan asleep at the wheel. When she ducked her head in through his open window, what she saw was far worse than she had expected. Something she wished she hadn't seen. With her body straddled atop Abdul Khan, Nanny Martha's blouse buttons were all undone, and one of her earrings was pressed against the driver's beard. Martha, what do you think you're doing? Shazre shouted as the stunned Filipina nanny adjusted her disheveled hair. Martha, I'm going to report you to your embassy, and then I'm going to sue them for providing me such a frisky maid. Can't you control your urges till you're off duty? And as for you, Abdul Khan, I will be reporting your actions to Sahib. Maybe I'll call your wife too. I think she should know what her husband is up to at work, don't you?
So this is a fascinating scene. In addition to its humorous touch,
Yes.
it also talks about the interaction between the classes. So
Yes.
earlier you mentioned that you've written about a social class that is seemingly disconnected from what's going on,
Yeah.
but they still have a retinue of servants. They have
They do.
nanny ones and nanny twos and
Yes.
driver ones and driver twos. So the question I wanted to ask you, and that's something that irks me to this day, is that lots of fiction with a Karachi focus delves more into the lives of the privileged elite. Is it easier to write about that side?
Um, well, I wouldn't. Firstly, I would just say writing is not easy.
See, the
I
reason
mean,
I asked you
yeah,
this question is because I know you're capable of writing about the completely downtrodden and the very poor as well, because you contributed a story for
yes,
us
yes.
in an
For your
upcoming
anthology,
anthology.
yes.
So we know that you can do that as well. But
Yeah.
is it more easy for you to do something that is?
I wouldn't call it easy, but I think why people or myself resort to writing about the privileged
Mhm.
class is because it's more glamorous, maybe.
Okay.
I think that when we see a Tom Cruise movie or watch
Mhm.
Big Little Lies, um, entertainment is sort of about what the glamorous lot is doing.
Okay.
So I think I picked it up because I wanted to show a glamorous part of Karachi as well.
So is that an escape route for the reader, or is it?
I wouldn't call it an escape route completely because you've read the book and you know that I've tried to not just focus on only bad and only good. Whenever I talk about my characters, I always say that I've tried to give them shape in a way that's very human.
Mhm.
So I wouldn't say that it's easier about to write about the elite
Mhm.
because they're different voices. There's somebody who's struggling to become somebody, somebody who has it all but isn't sort of happy in her
Uh-huh.
space, you know. So no, it wasn't as easy, but I chose it because I felt that this particular story is about parents who are just taking it to another level.
Mhm.
We've been raised up in one manner. I remember that my brothers, whenever they would be out of the house, my mother wouldn't know. And not to say that she was an absent parent or anything, she knew exactly what was going on in her
Mhm.
house. She was a homemaker. And I was, I guess, sheltered a bit more with being a girl, but my brothers would come back home at 8 o'clock at night, and she never knew where they were. They'd walk to the nearest club, or they'd be playing cricket in the on the streets and stuff. And I felt like even for my own son today,
Mhm.
I can't do that. I'd probably be walking with him or playing cricket with him. If he's out on the street. So the story actually came about when I was sitting at my own children's sports day, and I just thought to myself, and I was like, this
So
is so
was it
different.
more observation and research
um Yes
than
and
just?
yes and no, because I'd say that I'm not any of the characters in the book. This is
But
not.
surely other people are.
But yeah, maybe a mix and a collection of. So I've just this is one sports day that we talk about. I've sat through countless.
Mhm.
The runners always, the fast one always win the sports day. Their parents are always at the edge of their seats and shouting the most, and I just found that whole scene
Mhm.
so interesting to write about because I haven't read it in Pakistan before. I don't think anyone's sort of taken this theme and written something about a story that revolves around parents,
Mhm.
and how they can somehow affect, destroy, um, make a good connection with their kids. So there are different emotions that run through the story as well.
So
Uh,
you mentioned helicopter parenting quite a lot. This is an
yes,
interesting
yes,
term, and your book deals with that to a very great extent. In fact, Nadia AR, the novelist,
yeah,
refers to your book in a very positive light. She says talks about the perils and pressures of modern day
yeah.
parenting. Now you tell me, what does your book serve to do in that context? What sort of a message does it give to parents who have to put impose, I would say, expectations on children that they cannot
Yeah.
always fulfill?
So it has. I've tried to, in my own, humble capacity, to touch a couple of topics during the course of this book. I feel that parents today have tried to put themselves in situations where it's not straightforward anymore. It's not just work, it's not just parenting, it's not just socializing, it's not just competition. They have invested themselves in so many things that I feel like they suffer from being too busy. I feel like it they find it difficult to prioritize time with the children, time with social media, time with socializing.
So do they
And
end up overcompensating?
yes. So I think when I use the term helicopter parenting, I mean not to be so involved in the children that they exactly know what the children are feeling, but sort of a sarcastic term, I'd say, that like they're hovering over, but not really understanding what's going on in the child's life. They are in a way portraying their own competition, their own expectations, their own, I don't know, climbing the social ladder through their children somehow.
So there are three mothers in your novel.
Yes.
There's Shazri,
Yeah.
there's Minahe, and there's
Yes.
Hina.
Yes.
How do all of them differ?
So once you read
Without
the
giving
story,
any spoilers.
that's going to be difficult,
You
but
just-
I'll try.
Because each
And
of them depicts a very different
yes,
kind
they do.
of parent.
Yes, they do. And I try to make them within the same social circle. I try to make them as different as I could, because I didn't want the reader to open the book and get confused by that, okay, am I talking about the same woman, because they're all sort of similar, right? They
Exactly.
all are trying for their kids to have the best of opportunities being offered by the school, and just I think have a social standing, either through their children or through the best clubs, or whatever, like however their the elite society works. Um, I feel like I tried to give the characters personality as well as independence. They're not your like last generation women where they were expected to just sort of, I don't know, be homemakers, or just bringing up the children. So all three of them are, there's a backstory to them, and they have their due careers as well. Hina runs a salon. Shazre is more, she runs an entire company. She's the head of her company. She's the CEO. And Manahil is also, she's a graphic designer, and but she's not working at the moment. And there are reasons why she's not working. So I've tried to give them, that independence in the story as well. And also the reason, and I like this question now because I get to talk about eye on the prize, basically. Yeah. So I see how you orchestrated that here, but their prize is different. All of them are basically trying to reach for a prize, which is different for everyone. Hina is. Can I talk about what their prize is, or?
I mean, you can say it.
Okay, so Hina is
Without
trying
giving
to.
any spoilers.
Okay, so
because we
Hina
want
is
to
trying
stop.
to. Yeah. So Hina is trying to get ahead in the social circle somehow. Shazri is just dealing with her life as a corporate person. She's trying to uh, reach out. She's trying to reach places in a man's world, for example. She has to be aggressive. She has to go against what the society expects of her. She's a strong woman. All three of them are strong women, but more so Shazri, because there's an aggressive like streak to her personality as well. Aggressive, not in a bad way, but go getter. Manahil is, she has mental health issues. She's struggling to overcome, some anxieties that she has. So there is a prize for each of them. And through the story, they sort of try to not, I wouldn't say overcome, because I don't think it's, even as a writer, it's in my hands for them to completely, achieve whatever they could in a span of, for example, I don't know, a month or so that, it goes on during the book, but they do come to terms with some things that the story talks about. So yeah, I mean they are different. They're different in terms of family structure. They're different in terms of
But
even
none of them are victims, and they're not
yes,
portrayed in that
yes,
way.
yes. And I
Was
they,
that a conscious decision?
yes, it is. It is because I think we've heard too many stories about victims as well, and sometimes you like to tell stories of what could be. You
All
know,
right.
you don't always want to be at the end where you're complaining.
So
You
then,
know,
would this be almost like a fantasy world for you?
not really. So this the thing is that I got the liberty to talk about this story because I am talking about the privileged
Mhm.
class. So in the privileged class, you're not talking about your basic, day to day earnings or how to make it to the next day.
Mhm.
So this set actually has the privilege to achieve and has the privilege of choice, right? So when I talk about another class,
Mhm.
then I can't talk about strong women and matters of choice and liberty because sadly there isn't much choice given to them because they come from backgrounds where it's not easy to pursue careers that they want to. They would just be looking after. There's so many women who are actually supporting their families. Their brothers are not working, their husbands are not working, so they don't get to be the women that are in this book. So I wanted to portray these women as people, as humans who could pursue their careers and not be the victim, not be forced into, for example, marriages, have that element of choice.
So the fascinating thing about this book also is, I'm sorry to cut you off there. I thought we could just move ahead.
Sure.
So you've managed to portray different perspectives. There are multiple characters in this book. Children, adults, there are older people. You have it all there.
We have a good mixed
We have a
plate
good
chart
cast of
of
characters, exactly.
people in it.
But you're still using the third person perspective to tell the story.
Yeah.
Even then, that doesn't compromise on the essence of each character's trajectories. Their narrative is portrayed effectively.
Yeah.
Was that a conscious decision? Did you
It
want to
was.
establish a certain degree of distance by using the third person perspective
I
rather
did.
than using the first person perspective?
I did, and I did think about using, voices, as you see in
You've
a
seen
lot
it.
of
You've seen it in the book as well.
yes,
Because
they're thinking to
they're
themselves,
thinking to
basically. So
themselves.
the technique that you say that that I've used is basically rather than using the first person perspective, which has to be in one tone of voice,
Mhm.
then you cannot even if a child is speaking, then you can't even use words that a child would not.
Exactly.
So I think that it was important for me to give a third person's perspective because there were so many characters in
Mhm.
it and they were overlapping in their interactions as well. It would have been really short chapters otherwise. If I was using voices,
Mhm.
there would be like a chapter a page or like two pages a
Exactly.
chapter because the voice keeps changing. So had it been a two-character story or a max three-character story, I may have stuck to the first person perspective narrative. But I also felt that I wanted to talk about what they were feeling
Mhm.
because the story is about relationships, and
Mhm.
relationships don't stand on their own unless you talk about their emotional intelligence, basically. And I think I tried to do that with narrating from a point of view where there is conversation,
Mhm.
but at the same time they're just thinking a lot to themselves.
There's a lot of interiority
There's
as well.
yes, there's a lot of internal thoughts
Mhm.
that I write about, and I remember that I struggled with it as well because there was too much telling in the story that they were thinking so much because a person goes through so many thoughts during the day.
Mhm.
But as a writer, you have to make it interesting, so you can't just talk about what the person is thinking about all day.
It's
You
a
need to
balancing
make
act, yeah.
yeah, you need to make it a dialogue as well.
Interestingly enough, you mentioned emotional intelligence. You managed to climb into the skin of a child
Yes.
and tell her story
Yeah.
from her perspective. The novel begins with a diary entry that
Yes.
Amara Noor writes, and it's a very short entry.
Yeah.
And it ends, I'm not going to tell you how,
Yeah.
but it also ends in a very similar
Yes.
way. So, was it easy writing from a child's perspective? Did that require research?
So it was actually not that difficult for me because I have, I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old, so I have constant, research subjects in front of me. So, their conversation, I understand what they're going through. And as you said, I'm a teacher as well. So I go through enough children and enough parents to sort of have an idea of what they're thinking. Obviously, not completely because I'm not a child anymore, but I can have, I've had enough conversations about children to sort of come up with their voice. What does an 8-year-old think about? What does a 6-year-old or a 10-year-old thinks about?
But the beauty of this narrative is that you don't generalize. You have an Amara Noor who's
Yeah.
extremely precocious,
Yes.
and then you have other younger children. Must be like, what is the age group? Seven.
So
to
they're
eight?
7-year-olds.
Yeah,
They're in third
7-year-old.
grade. Yeah.
And
7
they
to
act
8.
like
8-year-olds.
regular 7-year-olds
Yes.
do.
Yes.
So it's fascinating how you managed to do that. So it was just all that experience that went
It
into it.
really was, but at the same time, I feel like um, you need to, as a parent also, you need to understand that children have completely different personalities.
Exactly.
No two 7-year-olds or 8-year-olds are also alike.
And this is the lesson that your characters learn.
Yes, and it has been so enlightening for me to also carry my characters, through the story, because I feel like they're also, each of them are struggling, with their relationships with their children. Because even their own children are not alike. They think that maybe certain things are good for their children. But then during the course of the book, they slowly realize that the children have their own minds. They have their own interests, and whatever the parent wants is not always what the child wants. And you see that. I mean, the sports day is quite obvious enough. So I can talk about it
Yes.
without spoiling the story. But the parents are so worked up, and not all the children in the story are as worked up about winning the sports day. It is a lot of there's progression. Like there's the parents want to put pressure on the children, but the children are like, oh, we don't care. Okay, yes, medal, trophy, but it's more like, okay, whatever. So it's different for each child. There are children who are like, super competitive and they can't take defeat, and they've been brought up that way. But then there are children who are pretty laid back, and it's just pretty much their parents who are putting the pressure.
So your book falls under the category of commercial fiction. We've had this conversation multiple times.
Yeah.
But did you consciously write a commercial?
I
book?
did. I did. So I have a lot to say about it.
Yes, you have a lot to.
So the thing is that I don't support slash understand when people say that we're reading commercial and it's a guilty pleasure. Or
No, I
they
agree with you. on
and
that,
they
yeah.
call any kind of work trash, for example, because it's either, I don't know, romance or like you said, commercial, contemporary fiction. I feel like there's a reason this genre exists, and it brings stuff to the table. It still talks about stories, it still talks about characters, it still has lessons in it.
Only in a less literary way.
Yes, in a less literary, in a less, I'd say, I mean, it's not prolonged as much as literary fiction would be. Literary fiction is usually, it takes its time to sort of set up a scene. What I do in a couple of pages, a novel from the literary genre would take maybe 30 pages to do. So this book, it can actually be read within a day because the prose is so fast moving, it's fluid. So I consciously wrote something like this because I think that this is also needed in coming out of Pakistan. There's lots of commercial fiction out of the
But do you
UK and
think
US.
commercial fiction in Pakistan is undermined?
I think so. I think so. People think that it's not literary enough, so it's not worth the attention. That you somehow haven't spent enough time on it because it's commercial fiction, which is not the case. I
Which
mean,
isn't the case.
it really isn't the
Undoubtedly, it
case,
isn't the
because
case.
for your novel to be as, even if I so say so myself, as fast moving as this one is, you need to spend a lot of time making it align. I mean, just because it's not, everything isn't described to the to the last centimeter, doesn't mean that it didn't require as much attention or effort in bringing it
So
together.
how do we change attitudes around
Well,
this
I mean,
issue?
there's so many things that one wants to change right now, and I think this is like people's last concern at the moment. I mean, there is just so much wrong, in the society, that I just sometimes have to stop myself, from being politically incorrect, or being too much of a feminist, or I have to stop myself, because there's so much wrong. But yes, this is also, I think, an attitude that needs to change, because I feel like a lot of maybe commercial writers wouldn't want to publish, because they think that not enough attention or not enough credit is going to be given to this genre. But I mean, I read a lot of contemporary commercial fiction. I feel like it's a substitute to even watching TV.
It's an interesting way of putting
Yes,
it.
I mean, if you're watching a Netflix show, do you every time tell people that it's your guilty pleasure? People watch TV to relax. You can, read a commercial fiction book to relax. I do that.
Mhm.
As nerdy as that sounds, I quite enjoy doing that. So no, I don't think that it should be any less noteworthy than literary fiction. And attitudes, I guess, will change over time once people sort of open their minds up to the possibility of reading and writing commercial.
But do you think this has something to do with the fact that our publishing industry is not as strong as it is anywhere else in the world? That we don't have commercial publishers, so we rely heavily
Yes.
on literary fiction that we maybe have been taught at school or anywhere else.
Yes. So yes, people do not want to take on fiction, actually, not even commercial or literary,
I was going to get to
because
that.
yeah, because
Publishing.
I feel like readers in Pakistan in numbers, it doesn't seem like it's a financially viable option
Mhm.
to produce books in Pakistan because of our distribution networks.
And yet you published in Pakistan.
Yes,
Both your
yes,
books. Your
yes.
first book was published by Markings,
Yes.
and that was self-published.
Yes.
This, however, is completely traditionally
Yes, it
published
is.
by Liberty Books.
Yeah.
Was it
It was a conscious decision, yes. I mean,
preempted that completely?
sorry. No, but yes, it was a conscious decision, not just because it takes so much time to produce, to find either a literary agency or approach international publishers. That is also a reason. I mean, in due time, I think that can also happen, but it takes much more time for you to figure out how things work. Because when you reach out to the traditional, the big five, I don't know if people know about it, but the big five
The big
publishers
five
of Pakistan,
publishers
of the
of the
world,
world.
not Pakistan, of the world, it takes a lot of time to get through to them, because they wouldn't take unsolicited, manuscripts, and they expect you to go through a literary agency, and then the agent wouldn't want to take up your work unless your name is known, or your work is published somewhere. So that process is A, very long, and B, I wanted to publish in Pakistan because I wanted to see how things work.
Okay.
I am very passionate about publishing in Pakistan, because I want to make something out of it. Wherever we lack, I want to be able to, in a couple of years, understand the process and have more coming out of Pakistan. And also, I wanted a little bit more control over my work.
Mhm.
So once you give out your book, then it kind of, you don't get to, have a say on what the cover looks like as much as you do in Pakistan.
Uh,
So I wanted the liberty to just kind of, have.
so, what are the pitfalls of publishing in Pakistan? I think readers would want to know
Yes.
what are the obstacles that writers may face.
So, firstly, I feel like because publishing is so small in Pakistan,
Mhm.
it doesn't give the average writer an opportunity to come into print because not many publishers want to print fiction. Like I
Mhm.
said before, that a lot of publishers in Pakistan stick to textbooks which basically have confirmed orders. So that is an obstacle. Just the fact that you have to be published. That's just an obstacle that because such less writers are getting published. Secondly, I feel like our distribution isn't great
Mhm.
because anywhere else what happens is that they have a set distribution for many countries in the world. A book that's published in the UK, for example, will reach multiple countries, and if it's by a South Asian author, then it will tap into multiple markets. It's
Exactly.
not going to be only in Pakistan or only in India or only in Sri Lanka or only in the UAE. So you're talking about, for example, 5,000, 5,000, 10,000
Mhm.
readers from every country. When you just come down to Pakistan,
Mhm.
that substantially reduces the number of books sold. So, for a publisher to publish something and it to be economically viable, they need to publish enough. They need to publish a good number. And for that, we need to
So,
tap markets out of Pakistan.
so we need a publishing overhaul at this point.
Yes,
We
yes.
have a lot of questions
Oh,
on
okay,
the online
okay.
platform, but I want to ask you one question that's been
Sure,
on my
sure,
mind for a
sure.
while. What are you working on next?
Okay, I knew this was gonna come up. So I actually started writing something recently.
Mhm.
Before COVID-19, I think life was just so back to back. Like I wouldn't get, time to read.
Mhm.
And since COVID hit, I've been reading so much that I have been inspired to write something now as well. So I've just started working on another book.
Excellent.
I don't know how and when it's going to sort of get to a point where I can show it to someone.
Uh-huh.
But I just started writing something, so I'm excited about that.
Excellent. So we're looking forward to that. And I'm going to dive into the questions that everyone is asking online. I've been frantically monitoring them.
Okay, okay.
So the first one is, what tips do you have to help someone overcome writer's block? How do you deal with it?
Okay. So, I mean, I actually hadn't written much since after I wrote the short story for your anthology,
Mhm.
and I think it's got to
We
do.
keep mentioning this anthology.
Yes, I,
Yes.
I I'm doing it like purposefully. I'm just putting in bits so people are thinking about what this anthology is about. It's a very interesting anthology. Please do buy it whenever it comes available. Um, so to overcome writer's block, I feel like if you're finding it difficult to write, just get your phone, get your laptop, and start describing anything. It could be a room, it could be an object. Just write 1,000 words about something. And even if it's something that you wouldn't show anyone, it gets you through that hindrance that's
It
stopping
gets
you
you into
from.
the rhythm of writing.
Yes, and even if it's a lot of people ask me, how do you write poetry, and I just tell them that whatever comes to my mind whenever I put it down, and then I later edit it or restructure it or
And
whatever it
generally,
is.
the blank page, the empty page
Yes.
is so daunting. Sometimes it's
It is
important
just
to change your pace. Maybe write in a
I
tiny
mean,
piece of
just talk
paper.
about, think about one character. It could be your mother, it could be a friend, or write a letter. Like to write a letter to somebody just to get those words out. So, or I actually feel that if you figure out a really good book, that
Mm.
also inspires me to write. So when you read something great, you feel like, okay, I'm gonna give, writing a shot again. So that works for me. So I don't know if
The
maybe.
next question is, what does literary success look like to you, especially in our country?
Oh, that's a tough one.
Is it an award? Is it?
Well, so I'll share like a little story. I found it the sweetest little post that I saw online somewhere. It had a cake which had my name on it. So I'm just putting. Yeah, I am.
Was
By
it
the
an
way, I
emoticon? Was it
wouldn't.
an actual cake?
It was an actual cake.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm not saying that I am a literary success, not by any means, but I just found that so sweet. It just said something like Safinah de Elahi is my inspiration or something cheesy like that. But I found it so sweet. And I thought that even if 100 people are reading something I've written, that is success for me. You know,
It's true.
if somebody has gone out and bought,
That
you
and the
know,
fact that they've taken out the time to bake a cake and write your name
yeah,
on
I'm
it.
sure they didn't bake it themselves, but I just feel like if they've given your work the time of their
Exactly.
day, I don't think. I
What
mean,
do
obviously,
writers need at the end of the day?
yeah,
It's just-
recognition, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it could be an award. Obviously, a person would be super happy, a writer
Uh-huh.
would be super happy to receive one. But just considered and acknowledged
Mhm.
that you're a writer and you've contributed something. I feel like that's a success for now. I mean,
For now.
I'm starting humble.
Eventually the cakes won't matter. So
No, the
what
cakes will always
the cakes
matter.
will
The
always
cakes will
matter.
always matter.
What would you say is your interesting writing quirk?
Okay. Um, an interesting writing quirk. How do I answer that? What interests me?
Any quirky writerly habit that you may have?
I think chips. I just hog on a lot of junk food when
Okay.
I'm writing and reading, by the way. So yeah, a lot of junk food that I keep around myself when I'm writing.
So how different is it to write a novel than writing poetry? That's another question.
Okay, I think novel writing is a completely different ballgame
Mhm.
because poetry is collecting poems, right? So they could be written at different points in your life, different times of the day. There, you don't really have to. Um, I mean, there's a theme to my collection as well, but it doesn't necessarily have to kind of follow through in a pattern. With a novel, you really need to make sure that there are no errors. There is a lot less, I think I'd say, subjective. There's less opinion on it because it has to follow through a certain pattern. It can't be free verse, for example. Like you can hide under free verse when you're writing poetry.
Mhm.
The characters have to align, the stories have to align. They're much more time consuming. The story is much more time consuming. It's um, it's a lot more work. I feel.
Mhm.
Poetry is just for me at least. I think it's a lot of feelings for me. So I just pen down my feelings in poetry. But for a novel, you really don't need to put in the hours for your re-edits and your rereads that you do.
So how long does it take you to write a book? This is another question.
How long does it take me? Like I've written so many. But so this one took me just to write. It took me about 7 months.
And this is your first draft.
This was my first draft, and then editing it with you. There were a couple of months that we did that, and then just
Here's something nobody knows. I actually edited this
yes. So
book.
Taha is actually the official editor of Eye on the Prize. But you've actually been such a mentor for
Okay,
me
moving
as
on.
well.
Answer the question.
No, but you just brought it up, so it had to.
Okay.
No, but so the re-edits and the rereads take a couple of months. There were a couple of months where I was trying to find somebody suitable as a publisher for Eye on the Prize. So that takes a bit of time, and then the actual publishing takes a bit of time. So all in all, I'd say 2 years. But writing the first draft is between I guess a year, a little more than 6 months, and
I suppose different books take different time
yes,
frames. I think
yes. So I'd say that
in my experience, one book took me a year and the other book took me 6 months.
yes,
So it
definitely,
really depends.
definitely. But I would also say that the lesser the time taken, it's actually easier to complete a book
Mhm.
because once there's a gap in your writing, to be able to get back to what you were, what tone you were using with the book also becomes difficult, because I remember
Exactly.
there was a month in between my writing that I had to revisit all my characters because I started forgetting,
Who they
what
were.
their qualities were, and I was like, no, no, but why is she talking like that? Because this is not what she was about. So it's better if you do it uh, on sort of like a consecutive fluid manner without any stops in the middle, because I've met a lot of writers who basically say that it's taken them years to write, and I feel like they probably stopped writing in the middle. They stopped writing at all, and then to revisit the story, it becomes a bit of a struggle.
So questions are pouring in, but I will just end with two
Yeah, we
questions.
should be, I think,
This is
wrapping
the
up.
second last question. The last
Okay,
question
okay.
I'm going to keep just for uh, comic relief.
Okay.
Okay. What was the first thing you did when you were about to write the book?
What was the first thing I did
You did
before
when you
writing
were
the book?
about to write the book. How do we begin writing a book?
Oh, okay. So the first thing that I did, I actually feel like I didn't do it the traditional way, which is that you sketch out your characters first and you know where the story is going.
Mm,
I didn't know where the story was going. I picked up a topic and I just started writing. Um, I knew that I wanted to talk about parenting. Like I said, I wanted it to be to have a sports feel to it, to have this competitive vibe going on. But I mean, I started writing, and before I knew, I had about 10, 15,000 words, and I thought that could this be
I
converted
think
into
that's
a
the way
book?
to do it. You just
Yeah.
wade through
Yes, so I
this
actually
uncharted
didn't know I
water.
was writing a book. So,
Mm,
to answer the question, when I started writing, I didn't know this was going to turn into a book. I was just writing about something that I was interested in. And when it reached about 15,000 words, I showed it to someone and I said that, can this, is this an interesting story enough? Because I had my doubts and I said that, would people want to read about this? And when I sort of got the go ahead, I said, okay, then I'll, continue writing this. But yeah, so the characters just kept flowing, and I was like, no, I want this person to sort of have a secret, for example, and I wanted it to have this big drama ending as well, because I like reading such books where things sort of unravel towards the end. I didn't want the pace to be sort of linear. I wanted like a big drama in my book.
So the final question, and I kept it specifically for this purpose. What do you like to do when you don't write?
Oh, I like to read.
There you
Like to
have
read,
it.
yes.
Great
But
answer.
but so I have they say that writers always have reading as their hobby.
Mhm.
So I have lots of hobbies. I want to talk about my hobbies right now.
Go for it.
So I love singing.
Mhm.
I'm a fitness buff, so I love yoga and I love my runs. And I think I contemplate my stories while running as well.
Mhm.
It just clears your mind.
It does. It
And
does.
because there's so, like I said, that I have an 11-year-old and a 7-year-old, and there's so many questions in the day that you don't have this mental space to think about a plot. And
Mhm.
I feel like, yoga and running helps me clear my mind. So that's what I do. I exercise, I read, and I sing.
Excellent. Excellent. So I think questions will be
Yeah,
pouring
yeah.
in over there,
I'll try and
and you
answer
can respond to
some of it
them
on the page as
on the
well. I don't have
page.
that on right now.
Meanwhile, you should get your copy of Eye on the
Yeah,
Prize
I
by
will,
Safinah
yes.
Danish, and we look forward to future books from you, and we hope this
Yes.
book does well.
Thank
And
you.
I
Thank
think
you so
this
much.
is where we end. Thank you so much
Thank you
for
for
tuning
joining
in,
in.
and
I think
happy
this was
reading.
quite a long
It was,
session.
it was an interesting session.